My name is Martin Klaassen and welcome to another episode of Light Talk, conversations with experts in their field. This time not one but two special guests. I met fairly recently with two team members of Gooee, Jan Kemeling and Mark Tallent, both of them working very hard in putting Gooee on the map. For those who are not aware of what Gooee is doing, they are the number one leading data platform designers, and something that also has a big interest for me. Some of you may know that I've been very active in developing lighting design of things, a service where we try to marry architectural lighting with data infrastructures. So this discussion was really interesting for me. We have been partnering with Gooee over the last couple of months in order to build up this relationship and see how lighting and data infrastructure can be merged together. And I think you will really enjoy this discussion that has a very big impact, I think, on how lighting and lighting design will be done in the future. My name is Martin Klaassen and welcome to another edition of Light Talk. Today I have two special guests, both from Gooee, Mark Tallent and Jan. Welcome, Jan Kemeling. And we're going to have a chat about the future of lighting, the future of data analytics and how it all is going to come together. First of all, I think it's probably good if you can introduce yourself so we know who we're talking to. Mark, Jan.
I'm Mark Tallent. I'm Director of Technical Business Development at Gooee. I've got about 20 years experience in building automation, and I've been with Gooee now for about a year and a half.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, my name is Jan Kemeling. I'm with Gooee since almost the beginning, half a year after they started. I'm responsible for global business development, and I have a lighting background as well. And in general a technology background for the last 25 years.
Yes. We've known each other a long time.
Yes, we do.
We do. Now, first of all, what is Gooee? Because a lot of people may not know or understand what Gooee is all about. So maybe you can give us a bit of background about what Gooee is, the history, and what Gooee means for today and the future.
So Gooee is a platform for integrating all the different technologies in a building on one single pane view. We have three different offerings, unique offerings. One is our LightView product, which is our proprietary Bluetooth mesh, which sits on top of the standard Bluetooth mesh itself. We also have what's called SpaceView, which is a space analytics platform, which allows us to see how people move and interact within a space from a commercial or from a retail point of view. We also have BuildView, which gives a single pane view of all the energy consuming devices in a building on our platform, giving read-write capabilities back into the space.
So why did Gooee come into life in the first place? What drove the development of that? I mean, I saw a presentation of Gooee like 3 or 4 years ago in Hong Kong and I thought, wow, these guys, they come from a totally different angle, not at all the lighting angle.
Well, I think it evolved, right? Has evolved over the years. In the beginning, we had more of a lighting background per se than we do it now. We have widened our offering along the way because we came to the discovery that there were many disparate networks in buildings, and lighting was one of them, where a lot of things were happening. And we went from first from analog to digital light with the LED introduction. Then we went from wired to wireless control. We went from lights alone to lights with more sensor capabilities, and then with communication eventually from the sensor data, but also for the control perspective. And eventually we said, look, lighting is not a standalone network. It is actually attached to something. It's attached to a building, and rather than looking at the lighting from a pure illumination perspective or sensing perspective, we started looking at it from a building perspective. So if you have a building, and then what else sits in that building? You've got the BMS, you've got the building management system, you've got all the equipment that is actually operated by the BMS, and part of that equipment, could be a lighting network like KNX or DALI. And then actually we started zooming in to the next parts of the building. So we call this the back of the house. That's basically the BMS system, where actually all the devices that are managed, from the back of the house, from the server, from the Schneider or Honeywell system, or ABB or Siemens, link into a lighting network or a Sentry network or a camera network or whatever it is. And then we started zooming in from there and said, how do we connect these separate networks into one system so that actually the building starts to do in the back of the house what actually the people who live in the front of the house are expecting the building to do in terms of climate control, or in terms of ambient lighting or levels of lighting that are required. So basically we said, if we connect the back of the house to the front of the house, and all these systems start talking to each other, irrespective of what they are and how they work and what protocols they use, then you got a truly intelligent building, and that's what smart buildings are about.
So it's all about data analytics, really, and what you do with the data.
Yeah, so making sure the data is as clean as possible, right? So it's not just about useless data, it's about getting the right meaningful data and presenting it in such a way that adds value to either the building owner or the commercial side of the business.
Because we see that a lot of people want to go into the so-called smart buildings and use data to analyze what's going on in space, and then use that data back to drive certain outcomes. But there's also a lot of people that do it for the sake of doing it without really, understanding what they need the data for.
Yeah, what we come across a lot, and we've been traveling probably to over 40-50 countries in the last 4 years. We have had thousands of meetings with people from the building industry, large facility management companies, building owners, building users, corporates, lighting companies, controls companies, smart building management companies, and basically what we noticed that everybody was actually working on some sort of part of the smart building solution, and looking at it very much from a device perspective. And what I mean by that is they, for instance, they think I have a sensor, that sensor measures this or that, be it air quality or ambient sound or whatever it is, and then they build the whole proposition around that sensor, and then go to a building and say, look, what I have, I've got this sensor here, and it does this and it does that. Would you like to buy the service? Then I can provide you the data from that sensor. But that again, it's very much device oriented, and it might not necessarily lead.
Totally different.
Yeah, might not necessarily lead to data that actually are useful for the user of the building. And if it does, you might still need multiple networks, from different sensors, and then if they're all disparate and don't talk to each other, you still get the siloed data sets.
That's very much what happens
that you see today in the wide world.
And that really differentiates what you guys are doing from what many other people are doing.
Yes.
Right.
It's a complete agnostic approach to allow any data instead from any sensor to be integrated to the
fully open protocol, scalable.
So we basically say we are agnostic to what people are doing and what they want to do in spaces. They have their own ways of measuring things, their own preference of what they want to measure. They have their own preference for lighting systems, for lighting protocols, for dimming protocols, for whatever BMS system they want to use. We said we don't want to touch that. Let people do what they want to do because they have a reason for it. All we do is we connect everything to everything in order to generate a platform where everybody can benefit from. And that can be a software developer, it can be a hardware manufacturer, it can be an applications developer who develops an application or a service on top of the data, and it can be anybody. It's a marketplace as well, where people who deliver value to the platform can benefit from each other's place in the market.
Interesting comparison to call it a marketplace.
Yeah, well, look, you have a lot of platforms that are in essence marketplaces, right? I mean, think of Airbnb, think of Uber, they're all marketplace platforms. And in a way, we can also fulfill that role. But first, we need to connect all the networks together so that the data are coming out of all the devices that are connected, and then that platform participants can actually build services on top of those data. Whether that be a wayfinding app or maybe an app that recognizes you as a person who prefers to sit in a very cool room or in a very warm room. So basically it's all about the people, and in the past it was all about the buildings, and whether people liked it or not, it was take it or leave it. This is the building, this is what it does. And right now buildings need to become more dynamic, and the true meaning of a smart building is that it can dynamically react on what the occupants of that building are doing at that moment in time.
It's also following what's happening in the world. We're moving from products to services, we're moving from hardware to software, and I think the Gooee is really playing in on that, and how the services that you provide will help improve the human experience, reduce costs of operating the spaces and things like that. Right?
And give control back of the building to the building owner. Before it was very hard for them to make changes in their own space. Once they were given the building and it was handed over, they were stuck with it. So now having that read-write capability to constantly fine-tune and improve the space as the space develops, as different people use it, is really key.
Well, we just met with Jones Lang as well, right? And their whole thinking is about how can I make more efficient use of the spaces that I have.
JLL very much says, in essence, our business is letting the demand for space meet the offering or the supply of space. And right now the supply of space is not necessarily in accordance with the demand. And I'm not talking only about the size of the space, but also on the right appropriation of space.
Correct.
So you can only do that if you analyze what people are doing. But you can also do it with asset tracking. People are losing a lot of time in offices by trying to find
this is
a place to
asset
work.
tracking device, right?
Well, this could be.
Could be.
Yeah. So basically, people are doing things in spaces, and today, I mean, in the past, what people were doing in the space was a lot more predictable than today. Right? In the past, you had your desk, and every morning at 9 you would sit at that desk, and you would sit there every day of the week, and sometimes you would have a meeting, but that was it. But right now, with the new ways of working, when people start working more flexibly, they might come to the office, they might not. And if they might come to the office, they might have their own desk, they might not. And maybe they come twice a week and they sit on two different places because they might on one day have to work together with a colleague, and the other day they want to work alone. So we need to serve those needs, and in order to serve those needs, you need to know what those needs are, and you can only do that by studying the patterns on what is happening in the buildings.
Now, I want to talk a little bit more also about technology, because you guys have spent a lot of efforts in research and development, and I know you've got testing facilities to make sure everything is properly tested and works under heavy stress as well. Can you tell a bit more about all that?
Yeah, the test centre, in my opinion, is quite unique. I work for a number of technology companies where they haven't had the luxury of having a space with over, I think we have over 300 connected luminaires, where we can stress test not just the performance of our wireless mesh, but the performance of other people's luminaires with our technology inside, but also other space and occupancy sensors. And that can run 24/7, so we know confidently before we release something in the field, it's fully tested, it's going to work, and it's not going to have any...
Under very heavy data loading as well.
Very heavy data loading, so that's how we really stress test everything. It goes through a rigorous...
But the robustness of the network,
yeah.
And actually it's funny because in that test center we have had many corporate visitors from all the big technology companies you can imagine. I mean, I'm talking in particular in lighting, whether it's Acuity or companies like Honeywell or Osram. They've all been to our test center for days, and they actually have studied what we were doing there, and all of them were actually flabbergasted, because all of them said, how can you possibly do this? How can you get a budget for this, to build such a serious test center with so much equipment and so many people, and how can you do this? And then I said, well, why couldn't you? I mean, you're a multi-billion-dollar company, and are you seriously saying that you are developing all sorts of technology, not testing it to scale, and then just putting it in the market. We can actually not believe that.
Yeah.
And actually, if we see what we actually learned from that test center, right? What we learned from that test center, and actually the errors we have taken out of the system, because we just figured out things that at once we didn't even predict to happen. Then we say, look, anybody who goes to the market without a thorough testing procedure at scale is actually taking an immense amount of risk.
I think you guys also have a vision.
Yeah.
Because that vision is really important to drive with this, I think.
Yeah.
But it's vision, and I think vision is one thing, but it's also having the guts to do it and to invest into
Put
something.
the money where their mouth is.
Yeah, and to invest into something before it becomes mainstream.
Yeah, yeah.
Basically, we are creating here. We are creating the technology. We're not following what others are doing.
Yeah.
And over the years, we have revisited and repivoted many times, and sometimes said, what we are doing, is it actually still good, or should we adjust our plans and maybe quit this and start doing something else? And so we revisited our business model several times and redirected where we, at the beginning, never figured we would go. And that's how we moved from lighting slowly more into the building space.
Right.
And that's how we are now. And now we figure that if you have a portfolio of buildings, that the most important thing in the building portfolio is that the owner of that portfolio, be it 500 retail shops or 100 office buildings, they want to get a grip on those buildings, and they want to know what these buildings are doing. And right now, these buildings are having up to several tens of different systems that are actually operating those buildings, and individually they have to pull the data out of these systems, and they all come in different formats and different protocols, and then they need to start comparing all these things, which are actually not really easily comparable, because they're coming from different systems, different formats. And that's what we do. We put a layer on top of that and say, look, here's your 100 buildings, so that actually the building operators or the FMs can see what is the energy usage in my 100 buildings today, or what's the most inefficient building this week versus the most efficient building. And then we can actually...
That's the information that in the past was really difficult.
Really
difficult.
Not only in the past, even today.
It was also kept traditionally, kept in the silos. People didn't want the value as a
And you offer that horizontal connection between all these different...
Yeah, and that's actually liberating. It's very liberating, because that's exactly what the big building management companies didn't want to happen, because they want to keep those data in their system so they can sell those data to you per building. So you can actually say, oh, I want to know this or I want to know that. Then they can make those data available to you at a certain cost. And that has been their business model for decades. And right now that's going to change, because those data will be liberated, and the building owners, and that's what Mark just meant, we give the control of the building back to the building owners, so they can actually operate those buildings themselves, and not because the system integrator of Siemens or Schneider has actually installed a schedule one day. They give the operation back to the building owners, and actually they give visibility over all the data points in that building. And the data
real time and historical.
Real time, second per second, you get the data from all your devices that are connected into that building, and that can be up to 100,000 devices.
It's mind-boggling, isn't it?
It is, but if you think
it is, but once it's simplified by us, and once it's all normalized, when you give it in that single pane view, it's very easy to understand what's going on without having to be an engineer.
Actually, it's also not rocket science, because if you think of an IT department, right? There's many companies that are big enough to have a massive IT department, and if people have problems with their laptop, they just call the IT department, and the IT department says, okay, I'll log on to your laptop, I look at what's happening, and I change a few things, and now it's up and running again. And that might take only 5 minutes, but actually today, those departments should also exist managing buildings like that, instead of putting somebody in a van and let them drive 100 miles to a building to enter that building and to figure out that there is actually nothing wrong with the device that gave them an alarm call. but actually it results in $1,000 fee for that guy in the van who actually drove to that building for nothing. And actually we said, look, we can do that. We can log on to these buildings and zoom into the device level and say, okay, we reboot it or restart it. And then we say, okay, we actually don't need to go there because the device is fine. And that saves a lot of money. It saves a lot less people can actually handle a lot more alarm calls.
You're not limited to any application, right? Any application from corporate to commercial to hospitality, everything works with this, right?
Because it's completely open protocol, that means that you can add any different system you want at any time. Because the API for integration of any of the IoT sensors is available to anybody, they can also be tied in. So at the minute it's a platform, but it'll become a whole ecosystem. Where people like yourselves adopt it and use it for your specific vertical markets or clients.
Now the big question today also is the GDPR, the General Data Protection and privacy issues. I think you guys is one of the first in the world that is fully certified privacy.
I think we are not one of the first, we are the first in the world even that actually has a full certification from the German TÜV, which is a famous institution.
Which is very tough to get. Tough to get.
TÜV to get. It's not easy. It took months of work and tens of engineers, full-time job. Actually to cooperate with those guys on rigorously testing, the vulnerability of the system, the weaknesses, the data traffic, the encryption, the decryption protocols, how we secured everything, hardware level, software level. So eventually, I think what matters is that people need to have a certain amount of faith that we don't put things in the market that are actually leaking data to parties that should not get hold of those data.
I think that official certification is really important because it's on everybody's mind, whether it's through Facebook or other social media. Everybody's sort of wary and scary about all this privacy issues and
it's a validation.
It's a validation. And as we discussed this afternoon, in a corporate environment, privacy issues may be more of an issue than in public areas. When you walk through the airport, there's facial recognition everywhere, but in an office, it probably needs to be on a much lower level in terms of recognition.
And the first, GDPR of course new, it only took effect on the 25th of May last year.
It's not mainly in Europe.
It's not been adopted by the US and not by Asia, but Asia will start following to a certain extent. America probably at lower levels of what do you call it? Strictness, but
sooner or later it will come everywhere.
It will come everywhere. On the other hand, people also should understand that it took the whole legislation and the whole industry a while to actually, know what the impact was of not having GDPR compliance. And we heard from TÜV that in Europe alone, thousands of cases had been filed in the European courts for non-compliance with GDPR. And those companies, the first fines were issued in Portugal to a hospital that had to pay like 450,000 euros of fine because doctors had insight of patients' records that were not their own patients. There's just that little that actually in compliance resulted in such a fee, but the fees can be much higher because it can run up to
it's a percentage of your income or something, or your profit.
4% of your revenue. And so that means for companies like big data companies, it can cost them billions. So if something goes wrong, it can cost them billions.
Now, this interconnectedness from systems and data analytics really needs collaboration. It's no longer something that you can do on your own. You really need partnerships and collaboration with people and companies that are in this business. Can you tell me a bit more about how Gooee goes about partnerships and collaborations?
Yeah, I think on the lighting side, we have worked hard to become, say, compatible with certain brands in the controls like Philips and Osram. that actually make drivers that actually drive the luminaires in the buildings. And there are two major brands, and we actually said also for the sake of following what people are used to, we don't want to tell people you need to buy this, you need to buy that. But if you are buying a Philips driver and you're buying an Osram driver since a long time, you can still keep doing that. You plug a Gooee device into that driver and it becomes a wirelessly controlled node in the network. It becomes a beacon in the network, it becomes a wirelessly controlled lighting system, and it actually becomes a sensory collection point where actually sensor data can be collected and sent wirelessly to the Gooee cloud. So those compatibilities are important. It gives the market trust. We are working on many more, and eventually what also happens is that many companies are now starting to work together. They started out on their own and they start building something like their own platform, and now what we see, people start understanding the benefits of linking platforms to other platforms. Where actually you say, okay, we got information in one platform that we want to link to the information that comes into your platform. And that's when the true value comes out, because then actually you can compare data sets that actually in the past never could be compared because they were just not available.
Because I'm a lighting designer, and you also come out of the lighting world, and you come out of the lighting control world. We tend to think from the lighting perspective, but actually this whole world is coming from the Google and the Amazon type of inputs. Lighting is just a vehicle in a way to carry these data platforms, right? So the whole thinking should be different. I believe what I found over the last 1 or 2 years that I've been involved in all this is that you need to radically change the way you think about this.
Actually, you need to forget about what you know, more or less. So basically, your starting point needs to be clean and zero, right? So you shouldn't be biased and say, hey, I got this plant in the backyard and I need to produce so many drivers a year or so many lamps a year, so let's develop something around that lamp so that I can sell it with a few tricks. That's not what smart buildings are about. Smart buildings said, look, disregard what you have. What is it that the people need in that building? For what purpose? What sort of data do you need in order to actually drive a certain service? And what's the sensor that could collect that data? And how could you communicate then the data from that sensor to a cloud to analyze it? And then where could we put it in? What could be the enclosure for it? And that could be a lamp, it could be a standalone sensor, and then design it into the lighting system.
We've compared it once with a mobile phone, right? 10 years ago the mobile phone was just phone and text. Today if you look what the mobile phone can do, it's amazing, and I think lighting is going the same way. The lighting point of tomorrow, the lighting component will be probably very small compared to what the intelligence of that light fixture.
It never becomes irrelevant because we need light, right? So that's the beauty of it as well, because that means that nobody can say, I quit the lighting business, because the light is still the most ubiquitously available powered device in the ceiling of a building. It's everywhere, right? But the lighting function in itself becomes one of the many functions that could come from that device. I wouldn't even call it a lamp, I would call it a device that also illuminates your space. And actually, that could be many functions. Actually, compare it like this. I often say to customers, today, the lighting that sits in buildings is like the Nokias of 1990. They were perfect phones. You could make great calls with it, but that's all you could do with them, right? And right now we need to move from that Nokia out of the 90s into a smartphone that does 100 other things. And the reason that you buy that smartphone is not because it is such a nice shape or because it's so beautiful and it's so nice in your hand. No, you do it because it has all the functionalities that you need for your daily activities. And then we come to another point. In the beginning, when we started traveling to lighting manufacturers and all these people who make devices, the only question was always, how much does it cost? What does a sensor cost? What does this cost? What does that cost? They never ask, what can you do with it? They always ask, how much does it cost? And right now, are you worried what your phone costs? You don't. I mean,
That's what it can do.
Yeah.
a Nokia was 5 times, maybe 10 times cheaper than your iPhone today. But nobody bothers about the cost of that phone, because if you're a businessman or whoever you are, you need that phone for many functionalities, and it's a must-have.
Well, this gives me a perfect intro to what I've started to do, which is lighting design of things, which is sort of converging IoT within architectural lighting design. And at the same time, like you said very rightfully, making sure that we remain the guardians of proper lighting design, and we still can create our mood and ambiences. So we have developed this collaboration together to work on this platform where we can sort of manage that process of integration. Maybe you can give me a bit of a feedback on how you view that, because it's a service that we are now providing which doesn't really exist at the moment.
No, nobody's really looked at how you would join all the core systems in a building together as it was developed and as it was built. Or looked at it from the net point of view. So you're in quite a unique position where you've got the skill set and the tools available to be able to join the dots up before something goes live. But also go in a retrofit point of view. This hotel is a good example of where you could put technology in to really enhance what was already there in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think Martin and I, we've known each other for many years, and I've seen Martin often in conventions, or you were often in forums and everything. I think you're the first guy in the lighting business who actually really started thinking out of the box and say, okay, this whole industry is changing, and whether I'm a lighting designer or not, the whole process of decision making is going to change.
Yeah.
Because people are going to choose for a network, they're going to choose for a data network in the building, and then they said, okay, once we have chosen, what sort of network we want to use, we need to start illuminating the space, and then those networks and the lighting, the data network and the lighting network need to come together, and that requires designer skills. So you rightfully said a number of years ago, it's not that you say the lighting are placed here and there and there and there, and then the sensors we just put it next to the light. No, it's first where do we need the sensors, and how can we design how can we illuminate the space properly by designing around that space where the sensors have to be.
Designing light. Because when I talk to my clients now, that's actually the first thing we talk about. We talk about data infrastructure. We don't talk about lighting. They say, oh yeah, lighting I know you can do. That's not my worry. My worry is, how do I create this data infrastructure? It's interesting.
It is actually, and actually, you thought that guys would never start looking at it like that, because they were so focused on so basically focused on lighting and where that light needed to be.
Yeah.
But the new technology of lighting is also giving you abilities to actually redirect, light into different angles, because it's you can actually control it wirelessly. So you can also give it different strength levels. You can have a lot of optical options available to you that actually can modify directions of light. And I think eventually light will always remain very important for the ambience.
It's part of our life.
It's part of
it. Can't do without it.
It actually becomes more important, because right now it's all about the experience of people in buildings, and how do they feel, and how do they reach their highest level of productivity, and how can you keep them happy. I read yesterday in Wired UK, it's a technology magazine, that people who are happy with their workplace are 12 times more productive. 12 times.
I'm not
So not 12% more.
Surprised.
So lighting is an essential part of that happiness, and you don't realize it until your lighting is really horrific. Right? Because then you say, okay, how can you work?
Can break and make.
For instance, in a
space.
restaurant or in an office space.
Listen, we can talk for hours. I would like to just hear finally from you. You're in probably the best position to see where we're going in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
So maybe each of you can give me just a final parting shot of where are we going from here? What has the future in the next 5 years in store for us? And then I'm talking about, of course, data infrastructures, linking up with lighting, etc.
I think you're uniquely positioned, as I said before, to now have an understanding of how all the energy consuming devices can be linked together and can be designed to be linked together. So not only can you offer a service from a consultancy point of view in the beginning, but where the light should sit, but also how data should pass through the building. But you also have the opportunity to make sure that that's actually delivered on site. Because half the battle is actually designing and making sure it's designed in the correct way, but also when you commission the dual lighting system, making sure those data sets are commissioned correctly, give valuable insights. Because there's a lot of invaluable data out there.
Yes.
Because of your open-mindedness and because of the skills of the people around you, I think that's going to be where you find yourself adding value in the next 2 years.
Yeah, I think what has changed dramatically over the last few years is that people have shifted their focus from buildings to people. And everything is now around the experience of the people. How do they work? What do they do? What do they want to do? It's about engagement between buildings and the people that actually occupy those buildings. It also means that the smartphone becomes a very essential part of the engagement between the person in the building and the building itself. And based on what people do and what they want to do in buildings will become more intuitive, and they will start reacting to the needs of the people. And it actually goes beyond the building, because it's the whole community around the building. It's also, where do people want to eat, and where can I find a parking lot, or I need a bicycle, can I borrow one, or can I share a bicycle with a colleague, or so basically it's all about interaction between the building and the people and the building, and the people between themselves and between their communities.
I think you made a good point with the smartphone. It works so simply, and people expect buildings to work in the same way as the smartphones do. And that's where
But they don't buy the phone because of the phone function, it's because what it can do.
All applications. So the whole world will be all about applications.
Absolutely. Well, we're doing a couple of projects together, so I can't wait to see it all come to fruition and see how it all comes together. Mark, thank you very much. It was enjoyable to talk to you.
Thanks, Martin.
Thanks very much.